The COVID-19 pandemic has brought out the best and the worst in world leaders. And the only way a country can get through the crisis is to have good leadership. Now, Malan of the Bhekisisa Center for Health Journalism joins me now to discuss who is displaying the right kind of leadership. And, you know, there's several facets and characteristics, Mia, that COVID-19 has exposed, especially of our leaders. I wonder, what have you been seeing?
Well, epidemics are really like mirrors. They reflect what society looks like, and they provide very revealing lenses. And in the case of political leadership, epidemics like COVID-19, because they require such decisive leadership, basically show you what you voted for. They most certainly reveal whether a leader of a country takes science seriously, whether they're apathetic or empathetic. And because epidemics almost always require different sectors of society to work together, they most certainly reveal whether a leadership brings people together or divide them.
It's interesting, your choice of words, that it reveals what people voted for, and if in fact you're getting what you put into that vote. And I wonder, let's make a comparison between democracies and non-democracies. Who is faring better?
So at Bhekisisa, we published an article about this by Lawrence Hamilton from Wits University, and he argues that in the main democracies have fared better, but that it's been a very varied response. So on the one extreme, we've seen denialism in some democracies and almost an obsession to put the economy above lives. And that is the cases of people like Donald Trump and Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. And as the result of these leadership styles in these two countries, there's been a huge loss of lives. And they have, because these leaders have not embraced science. And we even see like this week where some European countries have opened their borders, they have opened them, but not to people from Brazil or the United States, because they argue these countries posed to higher risk for infection. But on the other hand, we have witnessed scientific and really organized responses in countries like New Zealand and South Korea and Germany. And interestingly, most of the leaders in these countries are women, and they're progressive as opposed to Trump and Bolsonaro's conservatism. So democracy helps, but what matters most is what kind of leader is in place and where their priorities lie, whether it's with the priorities of a small group in the country or with the populace.
It's so interesting because I recently read an article which takes a look at how countries that are led by women have done much better in their response to COVID-19 in those countries than any other country. So thanks for bringing that issue in there. How exactly has SA done, Mia?
Well, President Ramaphosa initially did very well because he embraced science and he showed really strong political commitment to combating COVID-19 very, very early on in the outbreak. But as things got more moved on and things got more complex, our response started to show and reveal cracks in government, and cracks that were already there because epidemics are mirrors. It just shows you what is already there. So we saw police and defense force brutality started to emerge, and there have been uncoordinated responses with regards to food and financial aid. And while our government's communication about the science used for policy decisions, for instance, such as why we had a lockdown, was initially really excellent, a gap has now emerged. For instance, the science behind banning tobacco or why we would allow religious gatherings again hasn't been clearly communicated. And that gap, unfortunately, undermines public trust, and it results in less of a buy-in in government policies. But if we had to compare President Ramaphosa to people like Trump and Bolsonaro, he definitely, undoubtedly has done a lot better. And I think we have to give him credit that he has often acknowledged mistakes and then he has acted on it, for instance, with lockdown policies, then change it as a result of it.
Sure. Of course, in many instances, this is somewhat of a long game because COVID-19 is not necessarily going to be over as quickly as we anticipated. So I wonder how much of this analysis then also will take that long-term view, that there will be times when governments get it right and then there'll be times when they get it absolutely wrong. And we still have about 12 to 18 months of COVID-19, as we've been told by the scientists.
Yeah, and I think we could even face a longer period like that. But if we look at past epidemics, for instance, HIV, which has continued for 3 decades, it consistently shows us what is the results of bad leadership and good leadership. You can just look at South Africa, when we had a president that allowed, and a health minister specifically, who allowed antiretrovirals to be widely available. Our death rates went down, our life expectancy increased. And if you look at other countries, like for instance Ebola, it's very, very obvious where there's decisive leadership and where there's not. So we don't know for how long this epidemic is going to be with us, because even if we find a vaccine by the end of next year, we will still not be able to provide everyone with a vaccine who needs it. So this is certainly going to be an issue. The leadership is going to be an issue for a very long time, for at least the next 2 or 3 years.
Sure.